The street was wet from the rain, and the neon lights of the alien city flickered like dying stars. Strange creatures hurried along the walkways, their faces hidden under hoods, their voices low. No one looked at the dark corner near the trash piles. No one wanted to see what was there in that corner. A woman sat with her knees pulled to her chest, her skin pale and thin, her clothes torn and filthy. Her eyes were sunken, her lips cracked, and her ribs could be counted under her ragged shirt. She had not eaten a real meal in days, maybe weeks. Her head turned when she heard the sound of metal scraping against the ground. A stray alien dog had pushed its small metal food bowl toward the trash. Looking for scraps, the dog sniffed at a piece of paper, then ran off into the night. The woman's hands shook as she crawled forward. She reached the bowl, looked inside, and found a few cold pieces of leftover food. Without thinking, she picked them up and began to eat, chewing slowly, as if afraid it would vanish. Two young alien boys walking past stopped and laughed, pointing at her. One threw a small stone that hit her shoulder. She flinched but kept eating. The laughter grew louder, and soon others noticed, whispering and shaking their heads. In this city, the weak were ignored, the hungry were forgotten, and the dying were entertainment. At the far end of the street, a human man named Daniel was walking back to his small rented room. He carried a bag of supplies, his jacket zipped against the cold. When he saw the crowd's attention fixed on something in the corner, he slowed down. His eyes followed their stares. And then he saw her. Daniel froze, his chest tightening. He had seen hunger before, but not like this. The way she ate from that dirty bowl was not shameful to her. It was survival, pure and desperate. For a moment, he thought of walking on, telling himself it was not his problem, but his feet didn't move. He stepped closer, his boots splashing in shallow puddles. The smell of the street grew stronger, damp air, rotting trash, and something sharp and metallic. The woman looked up at him, her eyes wide and startled, as if she had been caught stealing. Before he could speak, a deep, mocking voice came from behind him. Well, what do we have here?" 3 large alien men stepped out from the side alley. Their clothes were patched, but their eyes were cruel. One of them kicked the empty dog bowl away, making it clang against the wall. "Look at you," the tallest one said, sneering at the woman, "stealing food from animals now." The woman pulled her knees tighter, making herself smaller. Daniel turned to face them, his jaw tight. "That's enough," he said firmly. The aliens laughed, their sharp teeth glinting under the neon lights. "Enough." The one with a scar across his face said, "And who are you? Human? Her owner? Her buyer?" Daniel didn't answer. He took a step forward, blocking their path to her. The smallest of the 3 tilted his head, eyes full of mockery. "A human defending garbage. That's new," he said, and the others laughed again. Their voices carried through the street, but no one stepped in, no one helped. Daniel's heart beat faster. He knew how this city worked. If he got into a fight here, no one would stop it. The law didn't care about humans, and it cared even less about the poor. Still, he couldn't turn his back. Not now. The tallest thug took a step closer, his breath hot and foul. "You should leave, human, before you get hurt," he said. Daniel's voice was calm, but inside he felt the tension building. "I'm not leaving," he said, "but you are, for a moment." The street fell quiet except for the hum of a broken light above them. The woman's eyes darted between Daniel and the aliens. She had seen enough violence to know where this was heading. Her fingers gripped the torn fabric of her shirt. Her stomach still ached from hunger, but now her chest ached from fear. The thug with the scar smirked and reached into his coat. Daniel saw the glint of metal, a knife. The man's tone was cold and slow. "Then I guess you'll be leaving." In pieces, the woman gasped softly, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel shifted his stance. Ready to move, the rain began to fall harder, tapping against the metal roofs. In that moment, Daniel realized there was no way to walk away without changing her life or losing his. The rain dripped from the edges of the buildings, turning the street into a line of silver puddles. Daniel stood firm, his boots planted in the water. The cold biting through his clothes, the three alien thugs spread out, forming a half-circle around him and the woman. The tallest one twirled the knife in his hand, the blade catching the weak light. "Move aside, human," the scarred one said, his voice low but full of threat. Daniel didn't move. His eyes locked on the man with the knife. The woman behind him tried to press herself against the wall, as if wishing she could melt into the shadows. Her breathing was shallow, her thin hands gripping the sides of her torn shirt. She knew what these men did to people like her, and she knew a human standing in their way wouldn't change their cruelty. The smallest thug stepped forward, his grin wide. "You're far from home, human," he said. "No friends here, no one to save you." Daniel glanced around, noticing that the few bystanders had already stepped back. Shops had quietly shut their doors. The street had become a stage, and he was the only one willing to stand in the spotlight. He thought of turning away. He thought of leaving this city and its problems behind. But the image of the woman eating from that dirty dog bowl was burned into his mind. He remembered his own childhood, the years when food was a luxury, when kindness came only once in a long while. And he remembered promising himself long ago that if he ever saw someone in that same place, he wouldn't walk away. "I said, leave her," Daniel said again, his voice steady. The scarred thug tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "You're making a mistake," he said. Daniel didn't blink. "Maybe," he replied, "but it's my mistake to make." The rain grew heavier, the sound filling the silence between them. The tallest one's patience snapped. He lunged forward, swinging the knife toward Daniel's chest. Daniel stepped back quickly, the blade slicing through the air just inches from his jacket. His heart pounded, adrenaline flooding his body. He had no weapon, only his hands and the will to stand his ground. The woman gasped, her voice breaking. "Please, just go," she whispered. But Daniel shook his head without looking back. "Not happening," he said, his eyes never leaving. "The thugs?" The smallest one tried to circle around, aiming to grab the woman. Daniel stepped sideways, blocking him. The movement put him dangerously close to the scarred thug, who shoved him hard. Daniel stumbled but didn't fall. He straightened, rain dripping from his hair, his jaw clenched. "You're not taking her," he said again, his voice louder this time. The tallest thug laughed, a cruel sound that echoed in the narrow street. "And what will you do, human? Bleed for her? She's nothing." Daniel's gaze hardened. "She's not nothing," he said. Something in his tone made the woman look at him differently. It was the first time in years she'd heard anyone speak about her as if she had worth. The scarred thug took a step forward, the knife still in his hand. But Daniel's eyes flicked toward a loose piece of metal leaning against the wall. In one swift movement, he grabbed it and swung it up like a makeshift shield. The knife hit the metal with a loud clang, sending sparks into the rain. The impact made the thug stumble back. Swearing under his breath, Daniel didn't press the attack. He knew this wasn't about winning a fight. It was about making them believe it wasn't worth it. He raised the metal again, his stance wide, his voice sharp. "Go," he said, "before you find out how much trouble I can be." The smallest one muttered something to the tallest. The three exchanged quick glances, weighing their options. They had numbers, but the rain was making the ground slick, and the human didn't look ready to run. Finally, the scarred thug spat on the ground, his eyes full of venom. "This isn't over, human," he said, stepping back. The other two followed, melting into the shadows of the alley they'd come from. Daniel waited until the sound of their footsteps faded before lowering the metal. His breath came in slow, heavy pulls. He turned to the woman, who was still pressed against the wall. She stared at him, her expression unreadable. "You didn't have to," she whispered. "I know," Daniel said quietly, "but I wanted to." He offered her his hand. She hesitated, glancing down the street to make sure the thugs were gone. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it, her fingers cold and light. Daniel helped her to her feet, noticing how she swayed as if standing took all her strength. "Come on," he said, gently. "You need food." She looked at him as if trying to understand his words. No one had said that to her in a long time. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Daniel tightened his grip just enough to steady her. The rain still fell, but for the first time in years, she was walking beside someone who didn't want to hurt her. Somewhere behind them, in the dark alleys, a pair of unseen eyes followed their steps, and though Daniel didn't know it yet, helping her had just made him part of a much bigger story. The rain had softened into a light drizzle, tiny droplets clinging to the edges of street lamps. Daniel walked slowly, matching the woman's weak pace. His hands steady under her elbow. She leaned on him slightly, not from trust, but because. Her legs trembled with every step. They passed closed shops and glowing street signs, the air thick with the scent of frying oil and damp stone. When they reached a narrow side street, Daniel stopped in front of a small food stall. Its awning was patched in 3 places, steam rising from pots behind the counter. A tired-looking alien vendor glanced up, his eyes lingering on the woman's ragged state. For a moment, Daniel thought the vendor might refuse service, but then the man gave a slow shrug. "What do you want?" the vendor asked, his voice flat. Daniel glanced at the menu board, most of it in alien script, and pointed to a steaming bowl of thick stew. "One of those," he said. Then, after a pause, "Make it 2. The vendor grunted and began ladling stew into bowls. The smell hit them instantly, rich, warm, and full of spices. The woman froze, her nose lifting slightly toward the scent like a starving animal catching a trace of food in the wind. Her hands twitched at her sides. But she didn't move closer. Daniel stepped forward. Placing a few coins on the counter, the vendor set one bowl in front of him and one in front of her. She stared at it, her eyes darting from the bowl to Daniel's face, as if waiting for him to change his mind. "It's for you," he said softly. Pushing it toward her, she didn't answer, only reached out with both hands, her fingers wrapped around the warm ceramic. She lifted the bowl to her lips and took the first sip. Her eyes closed, and for a moment her body seemed to melt into the steam. Then she began to eat faster, spoonful after spoonful. Her movements quick but careful. It wasn't just hunger she was feeding. It was the ache of years without comfort. Every bite seemed to pull her further away from the streets she had been trapped in. Daniel sat on the small bench beside her, eating slowly. He didn't speak, letting her have the silence around them. The city kept moving, footsteps splashing through puddles, quiet voices drifting past. The hiss of steam from the vendor's pots. He watched her shoulders relax, bit by bit. When the bowl was nearly empty, she slowed, as if afraid that finishing it would end the moment. She set the spoon down carefully, her fingers brushing the rim of the bowl. For a long time, she didn't speak. Then, in a voice so quiet, Daniel almost missed it, she said, "My name is Lyra." The name struck him like a sudden flash of light in the dark. He had heard it before, long ago, during the final months of the war. The Lyra he had read about was the last surviving daughter of a powerful alien house, one that had been destroyed when their world fell. According to every report, she had vanished, presumed dead. Daniel looked at her again, really looked. The dirt and rags couldn't hide the faint fine lines of her face, the way her eyes seemed to carry something heavier than any street beggar. He'd met Lyra, he repeated quietly. Her gaze sharpened, wary now. "You've heard my name," she said. More statement than question. Daniel didn't answer right away. "I've read it," he admitted. "But they said you were gone." Her lips tightened. "I was," she said simply. "And maybe I still am." The vendor called from behind the counter. "If you're done, don't sit too long. I don't want trouble." Daniel nodded to him, then looked back at Lyra. "Why would feeding you cause trouble?" he asked. Her eyes flickered away, scanning the street, "Because someone's always looking for me," she whispered, "and if they find me, I won't live long enough to finish another meal." Daniel leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Who?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not here." The way she said it left no space for argument. Instead, she stood, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Her posture straighter now, but her steps were still unsteady, and she gripped the edge of the bench for balance. Daniel rose too, tossing a few more coins onto the counter as thanks. When they stepped out into the street again, he felt the weight of eyes on them. He glanced over his shoulder. At first, he saw nothing but rain-slick walls and shadowed alleys. Then, just for an instant, he caught a figure standing too still in the dark. The shape vanished when a passing cart blocked Daniel's view. His instincts tightened like a drawn bowstring. Lyra noticed his change in pace. "They've been following me for years," she murmured. "I thought I lost them in the lower districts, but they always find me." Daniel didn't like the sound of that. He didn't know why he cared so much. She was a stranger. Their meeting just chance, but something in him refused to let her vanish back into that darkness alone. "Come with me," he said firmly. She stopped, suspicion flashing in her eyes. "To your home?" she asked. "No," Daniel replied. "Somewhere safe for now." Lyra hesitated, then nodded once. The rain picked up again, tapping softly on the streets as they walked deeper into the maze of the city. Neither of them noticed the shadow that slipped from the alley to follow, silent and patient. The safe place Daniel had in mind was not much, just a small storage room at the back of a quiet repair shop. He rented it sometimes when he needed a place away from the noise of the city. It smelled faintly of oil and metal, but it was dry, warm, and most importantly, hidden. He guided Lyra inside. Closing the door behind them, the light came from a single dim bulb, casting soft shadows across the walls. Lyra stood near the corner, her arms crossed tightly. As if keeping herself together by force, Daniel set a folded blanket on the old chair, then turned to her. "You can rest here tonight," he said. "No one will bother you." She looked at him for a long time before replying. "You don't know what kind of danger you've invited in," she said quietly. Daniel leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. "Then tell me," he said. "Because if someone's after you, I need to know what I'm up against." Her gaze dropped to the floor. For a moment, Daniel thought she would stay silent, but then, in a voice that was almost a whisper, she began. "I wasn't always like this," she said, her words slow, as if each one carried weight. "I had a family, a house, servants, guards. I wore silk, not rags, and ate from silver plates." She paused, her fingers brushing the frayed edge of her sleeve. "It didn't last," she continued. "Our world was caught between two empires. They came with fleets in the sky and soldiers. On the ground, we thought our name would protect us, but in war, names mean nothing." Daniel stayed quiet, letting her speak. "They executed my parents in the main square," she said, her tone flat but her eyes sharp with memory. "I was taken, but not to be killed. I was to be used as a trophy, a reminder of their victory." Her lips twisted bitterly. "They paraded me in chains, then left me in the hands of men who wanted to break me." Daniel's hands curled into fists. "Years," she said, her voice trembling now. years I was passed around like a thing, until one night, during a riot, I escaped. She lifted her chin, though her eyes glistened. I've been running. Since from hunters, from bounty men, from anyone who recognizes my face, Daniel finally spoke, his voice steady, and the ones tonight. They were after me, she said. They work for a man who's been chasing me across cities. He doesn't just want me dead. He wants something my family left behind. Daniel tilted his head. What? She shook her head. I can't tell you here. If I speak it aloud, it's like calling them closer. For a moment, they stood in silence. Daniel studied her, the way she held herself. Proud, yet fragile. The dirt on her skin couldn't hide. The truth? She wasn't just some street beggar. She was someone important. Someone who had seen more cruelty than most could survive. Why keep running alone? Daniel asked finally. Her eyes met his, sharp and searching. Because every person who's tried to help me has died, she said. The words hung heavy in the air. And I don't want your blood on my hands. Daniel straightened. I'm not afraid of dying, he said. Lyra's expression darkened. You should be, she replied, her voice almost breaking. They don't just kill, they make an example, so others will fear even trying to help from somewhere outside. A faint sound broke the moment, a soft scrape, like a boot against stone. Daniel moved to the door silently, opening it just enough to glance into the alley. The shadows were still, the rain dripping from the eaves, but he knew what he had. Felt all evening eyes watching them, waiting. He shut the door again, turning back to her. If they're coming, I'd rather be ready, he said. Lyra nodded once. I know a place, she said, her tone low. Somewhere they can't. Follow Isley, but it's dangerous, not just because of them. Daniel stepped closer. If it keeps you alive, I'm in. Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something close. You don't even know me, she said. Daniel shrugged. I know enough. Lyra looked down at the blanket he'd given her, her hand brushing over the worn fabric. Her voice softened. It's been years since anyone gave me something without asking for something back. Daniel didn't reply, but he felt the truth of her words settle in his chest. For her, kindness was a rare currency, more precious than gold, as she wrapped the blanket around herself. Daniel took the old chair and sat by the door. You should rest, he said. I'll keep watch. Her eyes lingered on him for a moment, as if weighing whether to believe him. Then she lay down on the floor, the blanket pulled up to her chin. The dim bulb flickered above, the sound of rain tapping a steady rhythm outside. But Daniel didn't relax, because he knew from the way she had told her story, from the shadows outside, that this was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, her enemies were closing in, and before long, the safe room would no longer be safe at all. The rain had stopped by morning, but the air was heavy and damp. Daniel stepped out into the narrow alley, scanning left and right. Before motioning for Lyra to follow, she kept the blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her eyes darting at every sound. The city seemed quieter than usual, but that only made Daniel's nerves sharpen. They moved quickly, staying close to the walls, weaving through streets where market stalls were just opening. Vendors called out their prices, but even their voices seemed cautious. Every shadow looked deeper than it should. Every face in the crowd could be friend or enemy. Daniel's hand hovered near the hidden pocket where he kept a small stun rod, just in case. Lyra walked beside him, keeping her head low. Her steps were light, but Daniel could feel her tension. They'll expect us to take the main roads, she whispered. We'll go through the lower city instead. Daniel had heard of the lower city, a maze of old tunnels, half-ruined bridges, and streets where even the patrols didn't dare to stay long if they were going there. It would be dangerous for more reasons than just the people hunting her. They slipped into a narrow side passage between two buildings. The smell changed instantly. Damp stone, rot, and rust. The sunlight faded as the walls closed in. Daniel's boots splashed in shallow puddles, his breath echoing off the tight walls. "Where does this lead?" He asked quietly. "To a bridge," Lyra replied. "But we'll have to cross the underpass first." Her tone told him it wasn't a place anyone would go willingly. As they reached the end of the passage, Daniel heard it, the faint, steady rhythm of footsteps behind them. He didn't turn his head, but his eyes caught Lyra's. "They're here," she mouthed. Daniel's pulse quickened. Without another word, they broke into a run. The path sloped downward, leading into a wide underpass where broken pillars leaned. At odd angles, puddles reflected the dim light seeping through cracks in the stone ceiling. Their footsteps echoed loudly, the sound chasing them as much as the pursuers. From behind, a shout rang out. Daniel risked a glance back. 3 figures, moving fast. They were the same thugs from the night before. But this time, they weren't alone. 2 more men followed, armed with blunt rifles and knives strapped to their thighs. Lyra's breath came fast. "They won't stop this time," she said, her voice trembling. Daniel grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward a narrow gap between 2 fallen pillars. "Then we make sure they can't catch us," he said. The gap led to a series of uneven stone steps, slick with moss. They climbed quickly, but the sound of boots grew louder behind them. One of the thugs fired a shot. The sound cracked like thunder. Stone chips exploded near Daniel's shoulder. "Keep moving," he shouted. They emerged onto a half-collapsed bridge. Below, a dark river surged, carrying pieces of debris from the city above. The wind here was colder, cutting through their clothes. Lyra hesitated, glancing at the unstable planks that made up the bridge floor. "It might not hold us," she said. Daniel stepped forward first, testing the wood under his weight. "It'll have to," he replied. They moved carefully, each step creaking underfoot. Halfway across, one of the planks snapped, sending Daniel stumbling before catching himself from the corner of his eye. He saw the pursuers reaching the bridge entrance. The scarred thug grinned at him across the distance. "Nowhere to run," the man called, his voice carrying over the rushing water. Daniel pulled Lyra forward. They were almost at the far side when one of the thugs jumped onto the bridge, making it sway. The rotten wood groaned. Daniel turned, his jaw tight. "Go," he told Lyra, shoving her toward solid ground. She stumbled onto the stone path just as another plank split under the thug's weight. The bridge lurched violently, sending one of the men crashing into the river below. His screams swallowed by the current. The others hesitated, and that was enough. Daniel grabbed Lyra's hand, and they sprinted into another tunnel. The air here was warmer. The smell of machinery in the distance. "This way," Lyra said, her voice low but urgent. "If we can reach the old market, we can disappear in the crowd." They ran through twisting corridors, past crumbling walls marked with faded graffiti. Daniel could hear voices behind them, but the gap was widening. Finally, light spilled from ahead, the entrance to a large open space. The old market stretched before them, filled with rows of stalls, hanging fabrics, and the sound of hundreds of people talking at once. Daniel slowed, pulling his hood up. "Stay close," he told Lyra. They melted into the crowd, weaving between shoppers using the noise and movement as cover. Behind them, the pursuers reached the market edge. Scanning the mass of bodies, Daniel didn't look back. For now, the crowd was their shield. But he knew it wouldn't last forever. Lyra's grip on his arm tightened. "They'll keep coming," she said, her eyes scanning every shadow. Daniel nodded. "Then we'll make sure they're chasing ghosts," he replied. But even as he said it, he knew the hunt was far from over, and sooner or later, the lower city would give up its hiding places. The noise of the market faded behind them. As Daniel followed Lyra deeper into the twisting paths of the lower city, the air grew cooler, the walls narrower, and the light dimmer. Lyra walked quickly now, no longer hesitating. It was clear she knew exactly where she was going after several turns. They reached a heavy iron door half buried in the wall. Its surface was rusted, but strange symbols were carved deep into the metal. Daniel reached out to touch one, but Lyra caught his hand. "Don't," she said firmly. "Some of these markings are traps. Touch the wrong one, and we'll both be gone in seconds." Daniel pulled his hand back. "You've been here before," he said. Lyra nodded. "This is the last thing my parents showed me before they died," she said, her voice softer now. "They told me to keep it hidden, no matter what." She knelt by the base of the door, brushing away dust until a small panel was visible. From her ragged clothes, she pulled a thin piece of metal, sliding it into the panel's slot. There was a low click, then a grinding sound as the door slowly swung open. Cold, stale air drifted out, carrying the scent of stone and something faintly metallic. Inside was a long tunnel lit by dim blue lines along the walls. Daniel stepped in after her, his boots echoing softly. "This place has been sealed for years," Lyra said. "Most people don't even know it exists." Daniel glanced at her. "So what's inside?" She didn't answer immediately. "You'll see," she said. But her tone carried both pride and fear. The tunnel opened into a large underground chamber. Daniel stopped at the entrance, his eyes widening. Before them stood a massive, circular vault, its surface covered in the same strange markings as the door above. In the center was a pedestal with a crystal sphere glowing faintly from within. Thin streams of light pulsed through it like veins, casting shifting shadows across the walls. "This is what they want," Lyra said quietly. Daniel stepped closer. "What is it?" Lyra's eyes never left the sphere. "My people called it the Heart of Tyrannus," she said. "It holds the power to control the city's entire energy grid. And more." Daniel frowned. "More?" She nodded slowly. "Old records say it can do more than power cities. It can disable them, destroy them, even bring them back." Daniel let out a slow breath. "No wonder they've been chasing you." Lyra turned to him, her face tense. "They think if they have it, they can control the whole sector," she said. "That's why I can't let it leave this chamber." Daniel studied her expression. "Why not destroy it?" Her voice hardened. "Because it's the last piece of my family's legacy. If I destroy it, everything they died for means nothing." A faint sound echoed from the tunnel behind them. Soft, deliberate footsteps. Daniel turned sharply, his hand going to the stun rod. "They found us," he said. Lyra's eyes flicked toward the vault. "We can't take it with us," she whispered. "It's too heavy, too dangerous." Daniel moved toward the entrance. The shadows shifted, and the scarred thug stepped into view, flanked by two armed men. His smirk widened when he saw them. "You've led us right to it," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. Lyra stepped back toward the pedestal, her body tense. "You'll never touch it," she said. The thug chuckled. "Oh, I won't. But my boss will." Daniel tightened his grip on the stun rod. "You'll have to go through me first," he said. The thug tilted his head. "That can be arranged." One of the armed men lunged forward, swinging a short blade. Daniel sidestepped and slammed the stun rod into the man's side. The electric crackle filled the air, and the man crumpled with a grunt. The second attacker raised his rifle. But Lyra suddenly pressed her palm against one of the markings on the vault. A burst of blinding light filled the chamber, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When Daniel blinked the spots away, he saw the two armed men stumbling. Disoriented, the scarred thug growled, "Grab her." But Daniel stepped in their path, swinging the stun rod in a wide arc. "Run, Lyra," he shouted. She hesitated only a second before darting toward the tunnel on the far side of the chamber. Daniel followed, the sound of boots pounding after them. The tunnel narrowed, twisting sharply until they emerged into a shaft with a ladder leading upward. "Climb," Daniel urged. Lyra grabbed the rungs, hauling herself up, the blanket around her shoulders slipping away. Daniel waited until she was halfway up before starting after her. Below, the scarred thug appeared, his eyes full of rage. "This isn't over, human," he shouted, his voice echoing in the shaft. Daniel didn't bother replying. They reached the top, forcing open a rusted hatch that led into another section of the lower city. As they stepped out, Lyra's chest rose and fell quickly. "They won't stop," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel nodded. "Then we don't give them the chance." She looked at him, her eyes searching his. "Why are you still helping me?" she asked. Daniel met her gaze without flinching. "Because someone should," he said simply. For a long moment, she said nothing, then turned to lead the way, somewhere deep underground. The heart of Tyrannus still pulsed in the dark, waiting for the day it would decide the fate of the city. The hatch clanged shut behind them, and the sound echoed faintly in the narrow stone corridor. Daniel leaned against the wall for a moment, catching his breath. Lyra stood a few steps ahead, her shoulders rising and falling quickly, her face pale but determined. They were in an old section of the lower city, a place where the walls were cracked and the air smelled of rust and rainwater. Faint shafts of light fell through holes in the ceiling far above. The sound of the river beneath the streets whispered in the distance. "We can't stay here," Lyra said quietly. "They'll find another way up." Daniel nodded, straightening. "Where's the nearest exit to the upper levels?" he asked. "There's a stairway 2 streets over," she replied, "but it's open." "They'll see us." Daniel considered their options. "We could head to my place," he offered. "I know ways in that no one else does." Lyra hesitated, looking at him with a mix of caution and something softer. "You'd risk them finding you?" she asked. Daniel shrugged. "They already know my face. Might as well give them a reason to remember it." They began moving, weaving through the old tunnels until they reached a hidden staircase carved into the side of a wall. The steps were slick, worn smooth by years of use. They climbed quickly, but halfway up, Daniel stopped. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Lyra froze, listening, faint at first. Then clearer, the sound of boots on stone, coming from above. "They're cutting us off," she whispered. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we make our own way," he said. Scanning the walls, he spotted a side passage barely wide enough for one person. "This way," he said, pulling her with him. The passage twisted and turned before opening into a large chamber filled with old storage crates and rusted metal beams. It smelled stale, but it was dry and quiet. At least for the moment. They stopped in the center. Lyra turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "You could leave now," she said softly. "You've done more than anyone else ever would." "They won't stop chasing me, Daniel." "It's not your fight." Daniel looked at her, his voice calm but firm. "Maybe it wasn't my fight when I first saw you in that alley," he said. "But it is now." Her lips parted slightly. It's as if she wanted to argue, but no words came. Instead, she lowered her gaze. "You don't understand what they'll do if they catch me," she said, her voice trembling. "They won't just kill me. They'll use me, hurt me, until I'm nothing." Daniel stepped closer, his tone steady. "Then we make sure they never get that chance." A sudden metallic clang from the far side of the chamber snapped their attention to the shadows. The scarred thug stepped into the dim light, flanked by 2 more men. His grin was sharp and cruel. "Thought you could run forever?" he said, his voice echoing. Daniel positioned himself between Lyra and the thugs. "You'll have to go through me first," he said. The thug's grin widened. "That's the plan," he replied, pulling a long blade from his belt. The fight began fast. One of the men charged. Swinging a club, Daniel sidestepped, slamming his elbow into the man's side before kicking his legs out, sending him to the ground. The second attacker came from the left, but Lyra grabbed a rusted pipe from the floor and swung it hard, catching him across the shoulder. The man stumbled, swearing. The scarred thug lunged at Daniel, their weapons clashing in the dim light. Daniel blocked a slash, then drove his shoulder into the thug's chest, forcing him back a step. "You don't even know what she's worth." The thug shouted. Daniel's voice was a low growl. "She's worth more than you'll ever understand." The thug's rage sharpened his movements, and he swung with brutal force. Daniel caught the blade on the stun rod, the crackle of energy. Filling the chamber, he twisted hard, sending the blade clattering to the floor. Before the thug could recover, Daniel slammed the rod into his side, dropping him with a grunt. The last conscious attacker staggered back, his eyes darting between Daniel and Lyra. Then, without a word, he turned and fled into the shadows. The only sound left was the thug's labored breathing. Daniel stood over him, the stun rod still humming. "Stay down," he warned, before stepping back to Lyra. She was breathing hard, the pipe still in her hands. Her eyes were wide, but she met his gaze without fear. "You? You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "Yeah, I did," he replied. They left the chamber quickly, climbing another stairway until they emerged into the pale light of the upper city. The streets here were cleaner, the air fresher, but Daniel knew it wouldn't stay safe for long. He led her toward his small apartment, a quiet place at the edge of the district. Once inside, he locked the door and pulled the curtains closed. Lyra stood in the center of the room, looking around as if she'd stepped into another world. Her voice was soft when she spoke. "I don't remember the last time I was inside a home." Daniel moved to the kitchen, setting a kettle on the small stove. "Well, you're in one now," he said, "and as long as you're here, no one's putting you back on the street." Her eyes softened, and for the first time since he'd met her, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. She sank into the chair by the window, her voice almost a whisper. "I was starving for food when you found me. But more than that, I was starving for someone to see me." Daniel poured the tea, setting a cup in front of her. "Then you won't go hungry again," he said. Outside, the city went on with its noise and chaos, but inside, for the first time in years, Lyra felt the weight on her chest lighten. She wasn't safe yet, not completely, but she wasn't alone anymore. And in a city where kindness was rare, that was worth more than any treasure hidden under the streets.